I wanted to make sure that everybody understood that, contrary to some conversations and rumors in late October and early November, we were moving full speed ahead and planning for winter sports and spring sports competition, including having a schedule ready for winter sports, downsized conference only, but a schedule nevertheless. Medical, we had team doctors and athletic trainers from all of our campuses working on a medical plan to make sure that we do this safely, and incorporating aspects of PPE and what we needed to do on the campuses and the conference. So this was all going on in the late October, and this was going on for a couple of months since we canceled the fall in August, trying to gear up towards winter and spring and to make sure that our student athletes have that experience. Unfortunately for all of us, the first, I'd say 3 weeks of November, things got consistently worse, where on our final call with the athletic directors, we quickly realized that this was no longer feasible, that things were getting progressively worse and worse. And in the interest of the safety for all of us involved, that it was better to pull the plug now on winter sports competition.
And to kind of echo what Zach said, for months going back to the summer, athletic directors from the 2 and 4 year levels have been working collaboratively in conjunction with the conference, with CUNYAC, and in the case of the community colleges with our region in the NJCAA, trying to put together a safe return to play. Like Zach said, unfortunately, in recent weeks, that was no longer possible. And at this point, we'd like to answer some questions as we kind of turn our focus to the spring, looking full steam ahead towards spring sports.
Great, thank you, Zach and Ryan. I know we've had some questions that came in through the conference social media pages. And so we'll start with those. And then as always, we welcome some questions from the participants who are viewing this webinar as well. First question that came in earlier this week was, how was the decision to cancel winter competition come about? Was this the decision of the athletic department, the schools?
In the end, everything that we do is done jointly. So like Ryan and I have been saying, we've had consistent meetings of our athletic directors and the conference office since March, either weekly or bi-weekly, catching up and going over the realities on the ground. Like I said earlier, we did not make this decision until middle of November, when we had a call and we realized it was actually almost the 3rd week of November when we made that call. And it just realized that this was no longer feasible for us to move forward safely. With the number of cases in New York City, New York State, around the country spiking significantly, and with the situation around us progressively getting worse, we didn't necessarily look at all the other conferences that were canceling. We were aware of what was going on around us, but we were trying to contain this within CUNY. And because our plan consisted primarily of play at the junior colleges and regional play, which is the conference that leads to the NJCAA championships, and in the senior colleges with the CUNY Athletic Conference. So our play was going to be confined to conference play only and the conference tournament in all sports. We weren't necessarily looking at what other conferences were doing because we weren't going to play those schools this year. And keep in mind, with the blanket waiver, our student athletes were getting this year eligibility wise free. They were getting an added year of eligibility. Obviously, if they are there for more than 8 semesters, so they have an opportunity to get this year free. So we felt like the downsized schedule in terms of conference only is still giving a meaningful opportunity for us to play and engage in sports, have a conference championship, potentially have our conference champion go to the NCAA and NJCAA championships, et cetera. So we weren't looking at this as a negative. We were looking to come up with the best positive that we could come from it. So it wasn't an easy decision, but like I said earlier, we realized that things were getting a lot worse. They were not getting better as we were hoping that they would do, that the cases were not going down. In fact, they were just going up and up. And for everybody's safety, we realized that we needed to pull the plug.
Great.
Right. We directors worked exhaustively, both on our own campuses, then coming together to kind of discuss some of the issues unique to each campus or that we are all sharing. And, like Zach said, after, holding out as long as we could and making every attempt, at a certain point, in the last few weeks, it was no longer feasible. And that's with the numbers rising and the safety of our students and staffs being affected by that.
Great, thank you, Ryan. So the next question that came in earlier in the week is, what is the main force behind our conference not being able to play sports, and several others around the country have found a safe way to do so?
Well, I think you have to look at geography and reality on the ground. Some conferences and some institutions are saying, hey, we have no issues whatsoever in our region, or very few issues, or in the whole scheme of things, smaller numbers than anticipated, or what's real in New York City and New York State. So, we can't treat them all with the same brush and pretend that, things are not happening in New York that are happening. So I think that's the primary factor, where you see Division I schools playing football and Division I schools, primarily Power Fives, playing football and basketball. You realize that their entire, multi-million-dollar enterprise hinges on getting funding from TV contracts and revenue from football and basketball. When you talk about Power Five schools whose budgets are anywhere from 70 million to 195 million a year, you realize that in order for them to survive and thrive, they need that funding. You have the money going out, but you don't have the money coming in, because if you don't play, you're not getting the money in, as we've seen from the cancellation of March Madness last year, or earlier this year, last season. For us, the reality is just different. All of our budgets that we have are geared to be spent on the student athletes and the programs we run. So there is no gain, only lose if we don't have sports. It's a loss from a student experience perspective. It's a loss from engaging our students in extracurricular activities. That money is there to be spent on the students. We're not, looking for TV contracts or other things to fund anything. We already have that money in our budget to spend on our student athletes. So we have nothing to gain from not having sports. We want to have sports. We need to have sports, but we need to make sure that it's done the right way and a safe way. And our decision is based on a lot of factors, but primarily on the safety. If you're saying, well, if they can do it, Zach, why can't you guys do it? Well, can you do it? Yeah, I think it's just a ridiculous amount of risk that we're taking, given the realities on the ground. Again, you got to come back to that. The realities on the ground is such that, it just does not make sense for us to move forward. I mean, they're doing a whole lot of testing, a whole lot of bubble that costs tons and tons of money. And they need to do that in order to justify the funds that they need to have coming in. For us, it would be just above and beyond the scope of Division II and III conferences are not wired that way, nor do they have the tens of millions of dollars funding just to be spent on travel, bubble travel, getting your own plane, getting your own hotel, getting a lot of things where you have to isolate and be separate from everyone else. and then going through the testing protocols that you have to do throughout the week multiple times for every single student athlete. It's just, I think, on a plateau of what's feasible and what's real. And I think that when you put all those factors together, it's not one that stands out a lot more than the other outside of the safety aspect. To us, it's a safety aspect that's first and foremost, but all the other, all the other pieces fit into just making a decision that it's better not to go forward.
Right, and the vast majority of our student athletes across the whole conference are commuting. So that's much different than every student athlete you see on TV is isolated with his or her teammates in their own residence hall, their own floor, their own townhouse. We just don't have those luxuries with most of our students commuting and being non-residential campuses. So, our reality, testing aside, is a lot different with our student athletes leaving at night, getting on a train, on the bus. A lot different than everything you're seeing on TV right now. And like Zach said, it's with safety in mind that eventually it just wasn't an option to play.
Because we could test 7 days a week, and it really doesn't matter because they're not in a bubble. You could be fine today, test negative today, then you get on whether you get in your car, whether you get on the bus, whether you get on the subway, whether you're walking, you're going to be in touch with a whole lot of people on the way, and then you're going to be living at home, or you're in touch with other folks where you're not isolated on your dorm unit or hotel floor, where you're only in touch with those people that have been tested on your team. So it's a whole different dynamic, and we can't equate ourselves to people that are completely different than us.
So how does the cancellation of the competition in the fall and winter affect CUNY's NCAA AQs?
At the moment, we are in year 2 of our AQ process of trying to replace College of Staten Island and deal with that. We're working with the championships committee at the NCAA Division III and the leadership there to see what we could do about extending our clock to the following fall. So rather than fall of 21 to fall of 22 to meet those guidelines. So it's a work in progress for us to figure that out. That's conference worry and concern. Obviously less so for the student athletes for the time being, but we feel good about being able to get an extension, given that we're basically going to go now a full athletic year. So between last spring, early this fall, and then winter, you're getting a full year of cancellations. That's one of the 2 years that we need to replace, and you can't make up for something that didn't happen. So my hope is that we can extend that to fall of 22, and that we would be in a good spot to replenish our membership by then. Brian, you're muted. I'm sorry.
Anything you'd like to add?
This just pertains to the senior colleges because it doesn't affect the community colleges. What we're trying to do on the community college side really is to work and bolster our community college division from within. We have the capacity to do that with a couple of our community colleges that do not have athletic programs, with whom we're actively working to engage and have them come on board as CUNYAC members. So we have, if anything, hopefully a good problem to work and replenish our membership from within on that front. On the senior college side, obviously we have Queens and Staten Island who are NCAA Division II, and everybody else is Division III. So we're hoping to expand our membership of the 8 Division III members to include some others who are non-CUNY schools at the moment.
Great. Thank you, Zach, for that clarification. So I think the next logical question that our student athletes are going to have is, what is the deadline if they're about the spring, in making a decision about spring sports? And is the conference also thinking about what fall 2021 potentially will look like?
Yeah, well, we are moving forward with the plan that we had for winter and spring to just now be planned for the spring. So our hope is that we can have a decision by first week of January on what that spring looks like for us and what the reality is on the ground by then. So, we have about a month now to go to see if the reality changes at all. Our approach from a scheduling perspective, from a medical safety perspective, from PP and other operational issues that we have to cover is largely the same, updated obviously, because now we're looking at not having winter overlap with the spring with some of the sports, so utilizing the same facilities, etc. So we're looking to have a plan, updated plan for the spring, and having the president and the chancellery weigh in and give us either a yes or a no by early January.
Got you. Great. So in regards to the spring sports, one of the questions from one of the participants in the chat is asking about the flexibility with the length of the season for spring sports to possibly include a pause for finals and having the CUNY championships take place after the finals. I'm assuming everything is fair game and under consideration for the spring, correct?
Absolutely. We can't paint the spring schedule with the usual same brush that we have in the past. It's a new reality. A lot of things are changing on the ground. The NJCAA calendar has already changed significantly, where they're ending some of their championships in the first week of June. So the NCAA has, I know that the baseball committee is meeting tomorrow. There's things that are happening on a regular basis in terms of the meetings that are taking place and people adjusting. I think we're going to have to see what their realities are and adjust to them, as we've done thus far. So nothing is off the table. Whatever can work within the academic calendar, we will certainly work hard to make sure that we fit in.
Right. In terms of our two-year colleges, like Zach said, we get the national championship date, which includes the date by which regionals have to be completed, and work backwards from that. But to the question asked, that's not to say a CUNYAC championship couldn't happen after the regionals. So like Zach said, everything's fair game at this point.
Great. The next couple of questions really kind of dive into what the spring will look like, and as far as like different protocols in place. So the first question that's coming through is there a checklist in place of things needed to be done in order to play? And if so, how can the athletes / coaches who will be playing work with the decision makers to create a safe and effective way to play? And once again, this is in regards to spring sports.
Yeah, I mean, we are developing that checklist and continue to update it. Really, we've developed it and continue to update it. We're going to work with athletic directors. We have calls tomorrow and Thursday with our athletic directors to kind of take a deeper dive in some of those operational checklists that need to happen to make it feasible. So, what can individuals do? I think the most important thing is for us to be on the same page, and then go forward and ensure that our coaches and student athletes follow those safety protocols and operational plan to the best of their ability, and to ensure that we if we're looking, and if we are not, if we're looking, we are looking to do it, but if we're looking to do this right and do it safely, then we're going to need everybody to be on board and need everybody to buy into the notion that we don't want to lose yet another spring season. We already had the student athletes lose one this past spring, all those sports that play in the spring. I think we would hurt us deeply at the conference office and at the member schools if that should happen again. So we're going to do everything in our power to try to move forward, present the best possible plan that we can, and then hope that our leadership feels the same. Given that our academics are going to be online in the spring, I think clearly it's an uphill battle. And I have to make sure that people understand that it is an uphill battle because no one else is seemingly on campus outside of very few people. So to have student athletes be back on the campus in the spring is a, big request. So therefore our plan needs to be sound, and hopefully we can deliver, and hopefully that folks that make those decisions, meaning the presidents on each and every campus and their chancellery, will see that our plan makes sense and that they will support it.
Yeah, Ryan, I would say that's less of a checklist rather than a finely tuned, detailed protocol of best practices that are constantly evolving at that. So we're constantly getting new information, whether from the CDC or from the city or from other leagues that are playing, both college and professional. Like Zach said, it's continually a work in progress, but that's for the better because these are only going to get more detailed and make the eventual return all the safer.
Great, thank you. In line with that, Zach, and this is a question for you about the AQs again. What will happen in fall of 2021 if we don't get the AQ appeal?
Fall of 21, we would stand to lose 4 AQs, not just fall of 21, but for 21-22 academic year. We would stand to lose the automatic qualification spots in men's and women's tennis, women's soccer, and softball. So those are the 4 that we would stand to lose. But I wouldn't go deeply into that just yet. Like I said, there are a lot of pieces there. That we could have we have options of adding a member now before fall of 21 if we don't get the extension to the grace period. And if we do get the extension to the grace period until fall of 22 to do that. So we've been doing quite a bit of work on that. I would not go deeply into that and panic whatsoever. I think that we expect to have that covered hopefully before fall of 21. But if we have the grace period extended to fall of 22, that gives us even more time to strengthen what we currently have.
Okay, great. So Regina, who's joining us on the webinar today, asked, would the sports we have in the spring only be our usual spring sports, or would it maybe include fall sports too, such as women's tennis?
Our priority is to support the campuses where they are and the space that they're in, which means we want to support the student athlete retention. We want to support the retention of the programs. And we want to support any and all institutions that make a decision that they want to have non-traditional season practices, weekend competition, whatever we could scrounge up to make sure that our student athletes have a meaningful experience while they are in the surreal world of online education and removed from our campuses. That's our job, and that's what we're going to push hard to do. So what that means for various sports is that we'll let the campuses decide what sports they can and cannot support. So if we're talking about women's tennis is obviously an exception because NCAA championships are in the spring. So therefore, our season for tennis would be in the spring. So when we talk about the spring season and the sports that we want to have in the spring, it would be baseball, softball, outdoor track and field, so men's and women's outdoor track and field, men's and women's tennis, and men's volleyball. On the community college side, it's outdoor track and field, men and women, and baseball. Those are the typical spring sports. What other sports campuses decide to incorporate and do during the spring semester, that's on them. So as I've said to the athletic directors, if 3 campuses, 4 campuses, 5 campuses want to do, women's soccer season where they want to play each other in the spring, there's no loss of eligibility. There's no obviously added burden of securing facilities, staff. There's a lot of issues, obviously. Athletic trainers who are going to be spread all over the place, etc. There are a lot of issues, don't get me wrong. But if campuses decide that no matter how many campuses can do A, B, or C sport, we're going to work with them to have something for them. It may not be a CUNY championship. It might be a CUNY invitational tournament. It might be something to keep the student athletes involved and occupied with this sport so that they don't necessarily have to not be involved and not have anything to compete for. So the long-winded answer to that question is that we'll wait to see what the campuses want to do, and then we'll support them as much as we can.
Yeah, Ryan, at the NJCAA level, every sport's classified nationally as a spring sport this year. So that's not to say we couldn't, as of now, sponsor a soccer or a women's volleyball. They'd be lumped in with the other sports Zach named.
Great, thank you. That's helpful information. So in lines with that, and this is another question from one of our students who's on the webinar today. Would outdoor spring sports be likely to play instead of indoor sports, or are they all going to get kind of lumped together, indoor and outdoor spring sports?
Spring sports would be spring sports. So whatever is classified as a spring sport by NCAA or NJCAA, that's what we would classify. So men's volleyball might be a good example. That's clearly an indoor sport, yet it's a spring sport. So, we're looking to adjust the calendar a little bit to start the volleyball season later than it would typically start, to accommodate, the notion that we're not playing anything likely until March 1st. So if we do have a spring season, including men's volleyball, in all likelihood, we would not start men's volleyball competition until after March 1. So yes, we would adjust the calendar, and whether it's indoor and outdoor, it doesn't matter. It's just still a spring sport. So the fact that there's a lot less indoor sports make it easier. The fact that it's outdoor sports primarily, that helps. It helps on one end because we're outdoors. It hurts us on the other end because now we're looking at, outdoor facilities that may or may not be available. So we really have a lot of work to do to work with the city and the facilities that we use that may not be on campus.
Great. So Isabel is asking about the protocols as far as the various sports. So like, for example, an indoor track event, the protocols for that versus a tennis match. Are there going to be different protocols or different things in place for each of the sports? It seems like it would be some universal standards, but also some individual things baked in as well, correct?
Without a doubt. I mean, you can't treat tennis and track and field the same, you could have a tennis match without coming within 6 feet of anyone at any point during the match. clearly that's not going to take place in track and field. So every sport is, going to be treated differently. Our hope is to have a green light to move forward with spring. And during that time, as we wait for a decision, we develop protocols for each and every sport. And the national governing bodies are doing the same. And, the national governing bodies for each sport are doing the same. They're looking to adjust. The baseball and softball folks are talking about not having a umpire behind home plate, but have them somewhere probably behind the pitcher where they're calling balls and strikes from the field, so they're distanced from the student athletes and they're not next to them. So there's a lot of protocols that are being discussed in all the different sports. Track and field, they're talking about, every other lane. You can't run in the same lane or the lane next to the other person. That also has to be adjusted for each and every discipline. How do you do that in the 1500 meters? You may be able to do that and have more heats in the 100-meter dash, but how do you do that in the 1500 meters? So there's a lot of factors that play in, and we would have to have those questions answered and protocols in place when and if we get the green light to do so.
Right, and to take that a step further, you happen to name, Ryan, two of the lesser risk sports, track and tennis. So there's tiers 1 through 3, with tier 1, a track or a tennis being the most low risk sports, with 2 being more moderate and 3 being the higher risk of transmission sports. Those outlined by the Ncaa Sports Science Institute, and it's data like that helped us, make these decisions.
Great, thank you. So Zach, this question just came through the chat. It said, Zach mentioned the conference has the budget to host the championships, but due to lack of government funding, many, if not all, CUNY athletic departments don't have funding. Where's the funding going to come from? Instead of using vans/buses, we need to be utilized to provide for social distancing. So I think they are, this probably addresses all of the, the game day protocols or the practice day protocols on each campuses and the funding that's aligned for that.
Look, I don't want to get into budgets on campuses, because that should be the answers from individuals on campus and not from me. I will tell you that significant amount of our budgeting comes from student activity fees on campuses and at Central. So therefore, the students are the ones who are going to school who are paying for activities on their campus this year. They've already paid for their activities. So therefore, it's important to understand that those funds have already been collected, and that athletic departments on every CUNY campus should have funding to work with. That's something that the athletic department needs to coordinate with the student affairs office and whoever else they need to discuss on campus. But that funding should be in place because it's earmarked specifically for athletics. So therefore, I don't see the lack of funding from the government being an issue. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to have enough funding if you need to get additional buses for social distancing on travel, etc. But I think that the fact that we didn't have fall sports and we're not having winter sports, that we could focus a lot of our time and energy on the spring sports. Hopefully that that allows institutions to be to move forward with the funding that they have to support the student athletes and the programs in the spring in a meaningful way. Hopefully that answers Jose's questions.
Yeah, thank you, Zach. The last question for the moment from the chat. Is there support from CUNY Central for the spring semester?
If there was no support from CUNY Central for a spring season, we wouldn't be discussing it on the call today. Clearly, Vice Chancellor Batista's office is very supportive. As a former student athlete, he understands the impact of athletics on the campus. He understands a lot of things that I'm so happy to have him sort of have those answers before I even bring it up to him. So therefore, I think it's really, really valuable that we have him in the position that he's in, where our office reports to him. And if he wasn't in our corner, we probably would have canceled winter, in early October. We would not be discussing spring sports right now, and we would not be discussing us presenting a plan to the chancellor and to the president if we didn't have the support to come up with a game plan, present it to them, and have them make a decision on moving forward. So I think all of that stems from having the support and giving us the leeway to come up with a plan in support of our student athletes, rather than pull the plug early and say, no, we're not doing this. This is just, they could easily say everything is online. We're not having athletics this year because clearly everything is online. So therefore, no one else is on campus. You guys won't be allowed either. They could have said that a long time ago. They clearly did not. And they're giving us the leeway to move forward if we could present a really good case. And if the circumstances at that point in time when they're making a decision allow us to move forward.
Great. So a couple other questions that came in earlier during the week that we haven't addressed yet is the potential or the likelihood that some teams from fall and winter sports would be able to start a off season or a preseason type training program in the spring semester, to kind of reset their whole schedule. Has that been discussed with the athletic directors, and what is the likelihood of seeing some of that opportunities on different campuses?
I think Ryan's probably better geared to answer that question, but clearly from our vantage point, again, we support anything that the campuses choose to do to support their student athletes and their programs. The more, the merrier, but it's really going to depend on their capacity. As long as they're able to do it, we're going to do everything that we can to support them.
Right. In terms of that question, I think that would vary on an institutional basis. In talking to other ADs, access to every campus, much less athletic facilities, which no one's touched in months. That varies by campus, but also in talking with athletic directors from around the conference, I don't know of any who would be opposed to that, granted that it's safe given that their administration approved it. So that would kind of vary. I can't speak to every other college's situation, but that's something, a student athlete coach, SAC should take up, with each's administration.
Great, thank you, Ryan. Now that fall and winter seasons have been canceled, will there be an opportunity for recognition of the 2020-2021 CUNYAC student or scholar athlete of the year and honorable mention honorees and some of those other ancillary recognitions through the conference?
Yeah, without a doubt. We've been, that's one of our major events for the year, the Scholar Athlete Awards Dinner. And we have tried every feasible way to hold last May's event to honor the student athletes that graduated this past May and June. And we have not been successful because we went from, we can't have gatherings of more than 50 people. And we went from postponing the event from May until end of August to early September to not pushing back everything to next May and trying to honor both last year's and this year's graduates in one ceremony. So for the time being, tentatively, we're scheduled for this coming May to honor last May's awardees and this year's awardees at the same time. in one event. We don't want to shortchange anyone. As most of you have already seen, we ran a really nice social media recognition piece from, April 1 through June 1, and recognizing every single graduating Scala athlete that was nominated. So we did that. We want to continue to highlight our Scala athletes. That's our bread and butter. We want to make sure that kids understand that their academic success is paramount. So we will continue to do that, and we will figure out a way to make sure that every single student athlete that is deemed a Scala athlete by their institution gets recognized. So that's our promise. The one thing we can't promise is when that's going to take place, because that's largely out of our hands for the time being. But our absolute intent is to have that event and to honor those student athletes.
Great. So we've just got a couple more questions here. Zach, I know this is something you're obviously well aware of, but there are over 1,000 signatures on a petition which was put out by the Baruch student athletes to try to save their spring sports competition. I wanted to give you a moment to kind of address some of those students who will be with us on the call.
No, absolutely. Connor McCabe from Baruch baseball team reached out and asked if I would join him and some of the other baseball team captains from other CUNY campuses in a frank conversation about, say, 3 weeks ago. We had a really good conversation for about half an hour, 45 minutes about state of affairs, same way we're doing so today. They were really good about wanting to see what the possibilities are of having spring sports and having their sport that they love and not miss out on another year of baseball. And we share their concerns and share their enthusiasm, because this is what we do. At the conference office, our job is to support the student athletes that play the sports and have the sports for them, because if there are no student athletes and there are no sports, we don't have jobs. Simple as that. So all of our efforts are geared towards supporting them. And I support their petition. We want to have spring sports just as not as much, if not more, than they do. I hope that they realize that. We're not canceling sports because we have nothing better to do. We're going to push forward. We share their sentiments. We share their grief and bypass seasons that haven't happened. We need them just as much as they need us. So we're going to do our best to, I read through the petitions, I read through the comments. I realize they're saying the same thing we're saying, but as the adults in the room, our job is to be responsible to them and do it safely, where, just think of the impact of not just someone getting sick, life lost. No one wants to have that happen on their watch. I certainly don't. So we want to do it, but if it's deemed feasible to do it safely, then absolutely we're in the same boat. Great.
So we have a couple more questions and we'll wrap up with this for today. So someone on the chat asked this question: would the student athletes have the option to figure out ways to get the contests on their own if funding for transportation was a major factor for canceling this spring?
I don't see transportation being a major obstacle. I think that would be a decision that each and every campus would have to make rather than us from the conference office. The transportation on my own to get to a game is a double-edged sword, because I would typically, if I'm transporting student athletes to Randall's Island for soccer practice or baseball practice or game, or softball practice or game, that would be covered under our insurance policy. I think that individuals getting to venues on their own opens up that Pandora's box of what happens if something happens to that student athlete on the way to or from. That becomes a major concern for all of us, because if I have one bus or 3 vans, okay, I gear my attention and focus on that and safety of those individuals in that bus or in those vans. If I have 20 cars going to a game, that puts everything out of my control. And I think that becomes problematic. The intent of it is obviously awesome, where people want to try to do this at all costs. That decision is going to be a tough one, but that's going to be made by the campus athletic directors and not by us. So that's something that they're going to have to weigh. I hope that doesn't become the factor. I realize that the distancing works in that case, but I think it brings a whole slew of other issues with it. So again, that's a decision that the campus athletic director would make for each one of their programs.
Great. And so this final question for this morning's webinar takes us down a little bit of a rabbit hole, but I think we would be remiss to not kind of discuss it as a factor. It says, how will the progress of the vaccine distribution factor into the decision for the spring semester? If most people in higher risk groups are vaccinated by March, would this significantly improve chances of having a season? And I think this is just another example of our eagerness for our student athletes to return to play. And realize there's a lot of ambiguity to that, but I think it's an important question to at least address on the surface.
You will very rarely see me punt on a question. In this case, I think I need to punt on a question, mainly because we're going into the world of what if. We could be here all day in what if scenarios. If you said to people on March 10th that the March Madness would be canceled, people would look at you like you have 3 heads. 3 days later, everything is shut down. So I think that the vaccine and testing, and there's a lot of what ifs there. I would sooner stay away from it because there's just too many unknowns. We've been, as a society and as people, we've been working on vaccines for so many issues. Some typical long-term issues like cancer, we've been fighting for decades. HIV has been around for 40, 50 years. A lot of things, flu has been around forever. We still don't have a vaccine for those. To think that a vaccine that's been developed in 6 and 8 months will be the be all end all, to me sounds foolish, but I'll digress. And that's a long-winded punt, isn't it, Ryan?
Yeah, I thought you were going to just stop at punting it, but apparently not so much.
A fake punt.
You might have taken it. You're not going to be working. You're not going to be working in the NFL anytime soon on that one.
Good. Fake punt. Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah, that was you watched that one, but that's okay. Ryan and Zach, why don't we just let you guys kind of wrap up and speak to the students, to our student athletes directly, and then we'll conclude from that point. So Ryan, let's have you go first.
Just to refer back to something that Zach said earlier, we ADs and as a conference are going to make every attempt to engage as many student athletes as we can in the months ahead. What that looks like, when it is, on what kind of traditional or non-traditional sport calendar remains to be seen, and how many groups we're able to engage in terms of different teams, also up in the air at this point. But just know we're doing everything we can do, as is the conference, and working collaboratively with CUNY Central. So, if no matter how it looks in the spring, it won't be for a lack of effort on any institution or conference's part.
Yeah, keep in mind, we were really looking forward to also having our first ever wheelchair basketball season. And that's something that we worked hard from conference office and Ryan Martin leading that effort for the past 3+ years. And, you know, we for our basketball coaches on the call, we were looking forward to playing the Alabamas and Arizonas of this world on a different kind of hardwood, same hardwood, just a different kind of a game, same but different. And you know, that is been a tough one on those 22 student athletes that Ryan worked hard to recruit and bring into the CUNY fold. So we understand exactly how you feel. You may think that we don't have our own student athletes, but we do, with our first ever wheelchair basketball team. And now we're going to forego our inaugural season. So there's a lot of angst amongst all of us to try to get back to normal. And we're going to continue to work hard to do everything that's in our power to get back to normal. And an intercollegiate world without, you know, athletics makes it really difficult. That's kind of what a lot of us have known most of our lives. And to think that we're going to go a full year without any sports, I would have told you in March, you're crazy, but it's happened. So we're going to just continue to control what we can control and try to come out of this as best as we can, and see that we return to active sports sooner rather than later. We are not looking to extend this longer than needs to happen. The minute that we're able to do so, trust me, we will.
Great, Ryan and Zach, thank you for joining us. This concludes our time for this edition of Talk About It Tuesday, sponsored by the Hospital for Special Surgery. I'd like to thank Zach and Ryan for joining us, and as well all the students and coaches who joined us today. And you know, hopefully we're able to address a lot of your questions and concerns. You know, and I think the overall theme is we all want to get back to sports when it's safe for us to do so. So if you'd like to rewatch or share this or any of the other Talk About It Tuesdays, all of our content will be available on CUNYathletic.com in the various social media sites for the conference. So until next time, take care and be well. Thanks, Zach and Ryan.